Well, so far we've gotten through day one, day and night, dark and lightness, without the sun and the moon and the planet yet. And then we have day two, and it really moves from heaven, and it talks about the earth itself, specifically the earth. Now, he could have told the story about everything else that was created as well, but we're focused on the earth because that's where we live. That's what we can see. And he divided the waters, and he created an atmosphere between the waters. And even though we do have moisture in the sky, and certainly around September we have moisture in the sky and in the oceans, just about equal parts here in Corpus, right? With all the humidity, we kind of walk through the ocean. Who needs to drink water in the summertime? Not us, because we just drink it right out of the air. And so there was water above, but when the flood came, that water vapor that created a terrarium, as it were, fell. And it took 40 days for it to clear out. And then also the waters of the deep burst forth, which would have brought forth incredible chasms filled with lava and hot water and all types of sediment just shooting up into the atmosphere and into the waters and creating all kinds of muck in the waters and dead animals floating around and different groups of different minerals everywhere, as well as, just a lot of soot in the air and different things that would have caused the atmosphere to take quite a few hundred years, to actually even settle, which is where I believe the Ice Age came in, because you would have still had huge volcanoes, very hot water, and very cold land masses originally exposed to the environment. And the weather systems would not have normalized back then. You could not have predicted hurricanes. It would have been an absolute chaotic mess. And you see, in order to have an ice age, you have to have extremely hot waters and extremely cold land masses. And they just say, they just kind of creeped over the earth and it's all been static state. That can't happen. You can't have an ice age like that. In an ice age, you have to have water that is evaporating at an extremely high rate, rain falling over land that is cold in order that the water doesn't just melt and roll back into the sea again. And you have to have a chaotic event prior for this happening for the environment to be that chaotic. And it sure sounds like this happened at the flood. But prior to that, I believe we had pretty close to one large landmass. At least they were pretty close together, or a Pangea, that spread apart. And it points to a cataclysmic history on our earth. And the evidence is there. And so you have the dividing of the waters, and then day three you had dry land appearing and plants appearing. And in order just to befuddle you, and if people want to say, I believe in the Bible completely, but it was a million trillion years as we know years today, as time travels today, before plants actually came out of the ground and life developed through the seed of a plant. But how does a plant grow unless there's a sun, moon, and stars in the sky? But the plants were created before the sun, moon, and stars. Now, there was light and there was darkness, but the sun, moon, and stars were created after that. And so that was day 4. Now, verse 19 says, so the evening and the morning were the 4th day. And again, we looked at the fact that the universe is not infinite. As far as biblically, it's not infinite. But again, remember, those that believe in only the universe, that this is all there is, Carl Sagan, this is all there is, and this is all there will ever be. How in the world do you know? You're one of 7 billion people at the time on a little speck of dust on the edge of the universe, but you're declaring that you know everything everywhere that's ever happened. And understand, when they talk about the Big Bang, they're not really talking about the beginning of the universe. They're just talking about the universe expanding and shrinking for infinity. So that Big Bang was just the latest one, because they've got to believe the material is absolutely eternal. And so they've built models on what the universe looks like where the evidence doesn't support those models, but they have to believe in those models or else they have to believe in God, and they have a problem with that. And so they fake their models all the time, and they throw their logic out the window. As where God created all this material, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, or that material that he created everything out of, and boom, he's still outside of it. And he's transcendent, and he can be inside of it as well. And this is how we believe in our God. Now, did he stretch it forth? The Bible says he stretched things forth. How fast does God stretch things forth? Pretty fast. He can do it faster than the speed of light. You know why? He created the speed of light. right? And so it's not infinite. And it says he counts the number of the stars and he gives names to all of them. You can't give all names to all things if there's an infinite number of them, because you can't divide infinity. You can't divide infinity. What's infinity divided by 2? It's still infinity. What's infinity times 2? Infinity. You can't do it. It's illogical. Right? And so there is a number. Now, what about God himself? Listen, God is another sort. He is beyond. When you think of the name holy, when it speaks to God, now God, it means set apart. But when it refers to God, it's other than. He's other than. We can't get a grip on him. And it's such a beautiful thing. If you mature properly in the Lord, God becomes more other than, and you become more humble, but you also understand how much more he loves you, this other man, this other than thing, personality, more than you could ever imagine, more love, more care, more nurture, more strength, more purpose, more creativity than anybody on earth could even begin to imagine. He's other. And if you do that in the proper way, you fall more in love with God, because you realize he really shouldn't love you, but he does. And that was his choice. So he has personality. He has the ability to choose, and he gave us that ability as well. This is our God. And so different than the world. The world says, have purpose. Ooh, and then they have to make up a purpose, because without a God, there is no purpose. And they say, be moral. Well, what's morality without a God? Because there's no standard of morality whatsoever. Good is just as good as evil, and evil is just as good as good. There's no moral standard whatsoever once you take away God. So every moral standard is arbitrary. So that's saying Hitler was right because everybody agreed he was right. Rule by the populace and rule by the mob. And so, guys, the world is so trying to convince you that you're an idiot for believing in a God. And the reality is, either everything was created by nothing, or someone created it. And I've never run into a hardcore atheist, no godist is what that means, who has been able to answer that issue. There's always an in there. They try to redefine the definitions. And I caught on to that. I got really frustrated. Like someone was redefining words, and I'm looking at this person going, I got frustrated. I didn't know how to handle that. And then I realized later, I'm like, wait a second, you have no right to redefine words. Because if you start redefining words, we're done. We have no communication whatsoever. Because communication, you have an agreement on an idea. And if you start changing in the middle, no good. No bueno. But they're making up new things because their case has no case. So we're starting in verse 20. That was all bonus, not in my notes. Sorry, I'm a little wound up today. Genesis 1:20, then God said, let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The chicken. An adult chicken able to produce eggs. So God created the sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded according to their kind. And we'll talk about that again in a little bit. We talked about that last week. And every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Now understand, he's describing this, but he also gives Adam dominion over the earth. And so even though we are to kill and eat, we're not to torture and be horrible to animals, right? We're supposed to take care of our environment. We're not supposed to pollute it for our selfish gain either. And we're supposed to do as best we can. But when it comes down to the baby harpsil and the baby human was created in the image of God with a soul that's meant for eternity. And so there is a value difference. But I tell you what, if you find a human being that just tortures animals and they say they're a Christian, they're going to have a problem with God too. Just say it. And you can tell the character of someone many, many times and how they treat God's creation as well. They certainly don't worship God's creation, but because they worship God, they have a respect for God's creation. I think we as Christians, man, go out and enjoy the sunset. When these north winds blow in the wintertime and the air is dry, go out in your backyard and lay back in a beach chair and just look at the stars and blow your mind on God. And it's almost a way of him just giving us encouragement that this is your God. It is a beautiful thing. It is a testimony from God. And he created these things. These things are amazing. And he created things in them like sharks often are alone, but dolphins are together. Right? And if you've been on a boat and dolphins start breaching, and they're playing. I used to surf in a place on the central coast of California. Also had sharks. But there was a lot of otters up there. And otters are puppies of the sea. And they just want to play. If they were on land, that's how they would be. And we would paddle across the harbor mouth to get to a sand spit where there was better waves on the other side. It was sketchy. It was scary because the rumor was sharks mated in the back. They didn't. This harbor, but it was always, But I tell you what, these otters would grab onto our leashes and pull them, and we'd go, And more than once, I had an otter come right in front of my board and just look at me in the face, banging a shell on banging a rock on a shell. Oh my gosh, heart attack. But just where did that personality come from? Why would animals even be playful? God, right? I mean, just blow your mind. The world is so overwhelming. We just need to allow God to blow our minds. Every winged bird according to his kind, and God saw that it was good. Verse 22, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And so evening and morning were the fifth day. Now, after the fall, God gave birds the ability to find a target on you. Boom. Anyways, okay. I think after the fall, he turned these beautiful, nice birds into seagulls. I don't like seagulls. I'd probably hunt if hunting seagulls was legal. Anyway, so you have now day 5, sea creatures and birds. Again, each one was according to their kind. And this is a word that refers to the fact that these animals are in their box, as it were. They're in their grouping, which means my little Shih Tzu, Kahuna, the big boss in our house, through a couple generations can be mated to a Great Dane because they have the same amount of genetic material. They're both canines. So there's a canine family out there. But think about it this way. How creative is God that he put enough DNA in those canines that he allowed to get onto the ark to stay, where you can have wolves, probably the top in that group, all the way down to, I don't know, what are those fluffy little ones that are kind of yippy? Really small. Anyways. Pekingese, right? Just, I'd hate to be a male Pekingese because everybody thinks you're a female, right? I'm a dude, But God is extremely creative. A man named J.R. Norman said this: a geological record has so far provided no evidence as to the origin of the fishes. And shortly after the time when fish-like fossils made their appearance in the rocks, already differentiation from each other and firmly established are represented by a number of diverse and often specialized types. In other words, they did not find fully formed, or they found were fully formed fossils. They didn't find all the transitions between these different fish. Now here's the thing, and here's the dirty, dark secret. If we are always evolving, we ought to have way more transitional forms than actual species. And they're just looking for one between two things that they think are related, and they can't find them. But they find a fully formed species, and then they declare it to be a missing link. But that missing link between those two would have to have billions of other missing links between that one and the next other one. And we can't find them. But doesn't that logically make sense? If we're always evolving, we're never really a species. We're always a transitional species, okay? And so he says this. And so there's some honest scientists out there. Now, on the fifth day, God created all the creatures that live in the sea and all the creatures that fly in the air. But remember, an evolutionist tells us that life evolved from non-life with no information to complex life forms with a ton of information. All you need is lots of time, and poof, amoeba to a man. But you have a hard time getting an amoeba. I've showed you a single-cell organism with all the mitochondria and the lysosomes and the DNA, rDNA, tRNA, and how all this functions. I mean, are you kidding me? But from an amoeba to a man, it just becomes really easy if you buy the line that random mistakes turn into very positive aspects in a creature. Now, if you look at the variety of sea life and how complex it is, how is that supposed to happen? They all live in the sea. Why aren't they all the same thing? Why aren't they all the same thing? It's a fairy tale. And you have to have more faith to believe that nothing created everything than someone designed everything. So evolution tells us reptiles evolved with wings and eventually became birds that we see today. So how did this happen? And they're not embarrassed to tell us. I looked up a few on the internet. I'd be a little embarrassed to believe this. But one theory says that these reptiles climbed up into a tree to escape from predators, and over time, they developed wings to get down, I guess. The question is, how long were they in the tree? And then the next question I had, and this wasn't in the article, how did their bones hollow out and become light, and why did they? Because it would have taken millions upon millions of years for this reptile to hollow out their bones so they become light enough to fly. But all this time, hollow bones aren't helping them run from other bigger predators until they could fly. So why in the world would hollow bones develop if it's making them weaker and easier to chew on and harder to attach stronger muscles to so they can fight off their predators? But it just happened. It just did. Just believe me. Skip all the details. Why did their scales turn into feathers? Scales are protective, and they're kind of hard, aren't they, to be defensive. So if they're turning into feathers and they're becoming weaker by their bone structure and they're trying to run away from animals that are stronger, why in the world is that a positive mutation that eventually would happen in a male and a female of the same species, and they happen to bump into each other and be able to have babies, and boom, all of a sudden you have birds flying in the air? What? Why? There's some heavy questions out there, and these are just my questions a few minutes over the internet as I was looking at it for about 10 minutes. None of these things would have been profitable until they were complete, and all of them complete together so that they could fly. So you have these odd geek reptiles walking around for millions of years, and they couldn't find mates because they're odd geeks. They're the broken, weird ones. Don't eat with me at lunch because you're weird. They wouldn't have found mates because by nature, animals seek healthy mates. That's why they puff up their chest and they build these designs and stuff like that to keep the animals healthy. God designed that in the males to say, look, I'm stronger than these guys. I'm gonna chase these guys off because I'm the strongest. And that's not just some, animal pride. God put that in them because he loves animals and he wants the strong to survive, and he doesn't want the weaker ones to propagate so that animals die off. God put that there. Another theory is no better. They tell us that these reptiles were running on the ground. And they're running after some insects, and they're flapping their front legs as they're running on their back legs. And over time, these front legs grew into wings to catch the insects because then they could eat better. So running turned a reptile into a bird. If you kiss a frog, it will turn into a prince. Believe me. And the evolutionist just believes that if you put more time, it's more believable. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I read a Reader's Digest on how dolphins evolved. Now, it's probably, when I moved out of my office over here and moved up there, I have the box, and I think it's still in Bob's office. Sorry, Bob. But back in the day when I actually used to cut out things and paste them in my notes, because that's how we got illustrations back in the day before the internet. That's how old I am, guys. There's a time without the internet. But anyway, so I would cut out my notes. And I think I might have this somewhere, but I want to find it so bad. And I try to look up in the annals of Reader's Digest and all this. But I was reading in Reader's Digest one day. And they were talking about how dolphins evolved. Now understand, the dolphin is not a fish, it's a mammal. It has warm blood, and it gives birth to live children, and I don't know what they're called, little cute dolphins. But it gives birth to live children, and it breathes air. So fish breathe water and pull the oxygen out of the water, so they're different by definition. Fish lay eggs. Right? So it's a mammal. So for a dolphin to become a sea animal, it had to go from the ocean to the land and then back to the ocean again. Okay? So whatever it was that crawled up on the sea and developed into a cow-like creature, was hanging out in the shoreline, foraging for fish or shells or whatever it could chew up for food, and eventually its legs grew into fins, and its nose moved to the top of its head so it could breathe easier as it was chasing these fish. 2 paragraphs, and they were unashamed to say and explain it that way. And they just went on to talk about how wonderful dolphins are. I think dolphins are wonderful. They're one of my favorite animals. They're amazing. I was paddleboarding out in the bay, and I had 3 dolphins playing in front of me one calm day. And it was just really cool. But really, from a cow-like creature hanging out at the beach, I hang out at the beach a little too much because my hands are, I don't know. I wish I could find the article, because I think, how stupid do they think we are? But if you have to not believe in God, you have to believe in these things, and you're not going to question them. And it's developed this system to where Christian universities now accept evolution and reject the Bible. And it's over 90% of Christian universities teach Darwinian-style evolution. It's wild. My daughter went to Baylor. That's what Baylor teaches. And I went head-to-head with the biology teacher. And he's trying to say, no, Christianity and evolution go hand in hand. I have a book. I'll give you another book. It's called the Bible. Read it sometime. Anyways, I'm on a roll, so I got to be careful. I'm going to run out of time. And if I offend you guys, I'm sorry ahead of time. I've had a rough week, okay? So I'm really sorry. I don't mean to be hurtful. If I get there, hopefully I don't. Anyways, Discover magazine once rated the greatest scientific thinker in all of history as Sir Isaac Newton. And I find that amazing. They wouldn't do it today, because Sir Isaac Newton was a conservative believer. He believed the Word of God to be true. And his contemporaries, even back then, mocked him, and they couldn't understand why he really believed in God as creator. So one day, Sir Isaac Newton made up an elaborate model of the solar system, and it took up the entire front room of his home. Now, when his friends came by, they were impressed by the details, and they asked him where he got the model, and he said, I didn't get it. Oh, you made it? And he goes, no, I didn't make it. I didn't buy it. No one put it here. It just showed up, fully formed. And suddenly they got his point. If you're walking through the forest, and you reach down, and you pick up an Apple Watch, your first assumption by this world should be, oh my gosh, look what the universe formed. Instead of believing that watch was designed by thinkers, and there was a lot of effort put into making that watch. And I tell you what, even though Apple Watches are incredible, you are way more complex than an Apple Watch. Because if you get lost, you can normally find your way home. That Apple Watch I lost surfing a few months ago never found its way home. The other one that I cracked the screen and broke it to pieces. I'm hard on things. But anyway, so I cracked it and I broke it to pieces. It didn't heal itself. But you can, right? You know, I mean, you think about it. And I had a big Apple Watch on my counter next to a smaller Apple Watch, and they were being charged together. And I came by in the morning, and lo and behold, there weren't any little Apple Watches either after that. I don't know. We're pretty amazing, guys. The Smithsonian website, just yesterday I looked at it. It says, there is no scientific controversy about whether evolution occurred or whether it explains the history of life on Earth. The Smithsonian website, pointing to the Natural History Museum, says, there is no scientific controversy. That is a huge, huge lie. Because there are thousands upon thousands of honest, not even Christian scientists who realize their theories are empty. I have a book that when I was early studying it on, and I can't remember what it is, I still have it in my office, and it's just a really simple book, but a bunch of guys wanted to be really honest with the theories that they were teaching in their universities, and they took a couple different 2 and 3 week vacations on the coast. I think it was on the coast of Oregon, just totally isolated, and they actually discussed from their scientific backgrounds their theories honestly, and quite a few of them became believers, and one of them wrote a little textbook, and it's pretty incredible. I mean, it's still very up to date today. But it talks about irreducible complexity and things like this. Like, why would an eyeball exist without the nerve? And why would an eyeball and nerve exist without a place to interpret it? Other than one generation of an accident, you had to have the place in the brain to interpret it, the highly evolved optic nerve, and the eye with all its cones and rods and light and dark and fluid and ability to focus and everything for that thing to be useful. It all had to develop in one generation. So they come out with this thing called punctuated equilibrium, or I think that's what it is, where everything happens all at once. Oh, an eye. Ooh. But it has to happen in a male and a female in the same zone where they can find each other, reproduce, and produce children with eyes. That's irreducible complexity. And you know, it's so funny because I'll bring irreducible complexity up to an evolutionist. They'll go, that's so dumb. And they're trying to make me look dumb. And I'm like, no, really, okay, maybe I'm dumb, but explain it to me. How does it happen? You know, and you get to very simple things that travel, and you look at a level in an electron microscope, and you find out these things are machines. And there's gears, and there's ability to produce energy within these things. Like, really? But they don't exist outside their own organism, because if they existed outside in the real world, they would just fall apart. Hostile environment. And so it just goes on and on, guys. It's wild. And again, one time I was visiting there at the Smithsonian, and I picked up a pamphlet, and the first thing it said at the top of the pamphlet is, evolution is fact. And you're a science museum, and you know that it is a theory. It is a theory, and you're being a bully because you're here on the mall, and you're supposed to be the national experts, and you're trying to force those that don't know better to believe that there's actually no scientific controversy, which is baloney. They have, they all have different theories because none of their theories pan out. And in all reality, evolution is not fact. Evolution is fantasy. Now, talk about the aging of the earth, which is very controversial. Because my whole problem with trying to age the universe is like we're trying to age the universe as human beings looking out into space where time may not travel at the same rate, because Einstein came up with a few theories that have been extrapolated out, and if those theories are true, time doesn't really pass at the same speed for everybody. If you live at the beach and someone lives in a Tibetan hilltop, time is actually a little bit slower for them because they're moving a little bit faster because of the speed at which they're moving around the earth. If you were living at the North Pole, or let's say South Pole because there's no land at the North Pole. Let's say you're living at the South Pole and someone's living at the equator. Time would just be a touch different between you two. But what about in the creation of the universe? I mean, the physics involved in this. And it's also the belief that higher density causes time to slow down. Is there a few different places where there's higher density in the universe? How does that all work? I have no idea. And so people are saying, well, it's so many billions of years old, and they believe it's billions of years old with minutes and hours and days exactly like we would see them. I don't know. I just know God's right. But there's a problem. Because I read an article where they took a lava rock that was 1 year old. It was reformed out of the earth, the center of the earth, and cooled down. It was 1 year old, and it was spewed out of Mauna Loa volcano on the big island of Hawaii. And it was sent to pieces of it were sent to various labs to date it. And the youngest it was dated was 40,000 years. And it just got older from there. But the evidence and the actual, it was a piece of lava that had been reformed as a new rock, was 1 year old. And so we get this idea, and everybody says, no, you're not a scientist, you don't know. You're a human being, you can think, okay? But they fall into the circular reasoning. And number one, they say the earth is old because of the different layers of fossils. Fossil age is determined by what layer they are found in. But then the age of the layers is determined by what fossils are found in them. That's circular reasoning. Because I said so, basically. Number two, the problem with the timing of the aging of the earth and the universe is the layers of the earth don't speak of the processes of millions of years. They actually speak more to a cataclysmic event, such as a global flood, more than it does of evolution. Because dying creatures don't fossilize, they decay. Fossils are created when sudden cataclysmic event that kills the creature embeds it in sediment and then compacts it under pressure as the sediment settles, like a flood or a very large flood. This is how fossils are formed. Number three, the problem, again, we spoke of this earlier, is the lack of transitional forms. Darwin's theory requires that there be animals that are halfway between a fish and a lizard, a transitional form. But you cannot find the record of these gradual changes from one species to another that evolutionists talk about. The fossil record shows distinct gaps between species, not gradual changes. And there should be more transitional forms in established species. And how about this one? The second law of thermodynamics. Evolutionary thinking says that things are getting better and more organized. New Agers speak about this. Why? Because they're not Christian. Because the universe is their God. And they want to believe that the universe can organize things. But there is a law that is accepted in all areas. It's called the second law of thermodynamics. And it states that in a closed system, things run down. Everything without additional information and without informed enemy goes from order to disorder, except for biological life, period. Except for living things. They all go from less order to greater order. And we're all evolving with more and more material. And the young men like to tease me because I say, what? And there it is in writing. What? That doesn't make any sense. A wolf becoming a German shepherd is not evolution. It's adaptation across the canine family. Adaptation is designed by God across kinds to ensure their survival. A bird's beak getting longer or shorter is not evolution. Because you're saying a bird becomes a bird, that's evolution. But that's what they always say. And they'll say, what about the Galapagos Island when it was studied? And in a time of famine, the birds had to dig deeper to get their seeds out. And some birds survived longer that had a longer beak. But you know what happened when the rains came back? Their beaks went shorter again. Guys, a bird becoming a bird is not evolution. There's no extra information. It just shifts across all its possible options in the already existing DNA that has billions of possibilities that God left there. That's my God. Everybody looks different. Everybody has a different, thumbprint or whatever it is. Our irises are all different. You know what? Praise God. That's a creation and creativity of God. I look at our church. I mean, our church is pretty creative. We are all so very different, aren't we? A bird developing lips and an ovary and giving birth to live furry creatures with paws instead of claws would be evolution. But we have no evidence of it. Okay? This is a problem. A guy interviewed a bunch of specialists in the greatest universities across America to try to get them to explain how things evolved to them, the scientists. And advanced biology students, he tried to get them, and they were all basically, because so-and-so said so. They had no process by which this happens, none. And they had no evidence by which this happens. And I think it's called evolution. You can probably find it for free. The guy that did the master's plan, what's his name? He's from New Zealand, I think. Ray Comfort, right. So Ray Comfort made this movie. You can look it up. It's on evolution. Now, he can be very obnoxious, but he's right in a lot of areas, I don't, a very interesting character, but I tell you what, he asks the hard questions. And that's a good thing to watch. And so he's like, a bird becoming a bird is evolution. We're like, no, because but it just points to it. No, it points to speciation. It points to the creativity of God. It points to the fact that God put enough information from Adam and Eve, and then from Noah and his 4 sons, to get all of us in this room that are just different. That's God's creativity, but we're all humans. Someone from the deepest, darkest part of Africa can fall in love with someone from northern Sweden, and they can have incredibly beautiful babies because they're all human. And that's God's plan. So information may be denigrated, but it will never be randomly formed to create higher forms with more new information. It can have scrambled information. Unscramble an egg, guys. That's what they're saying happens. It doesn't happen. We have never observed a positive random mutation that is developed into a positive trait. Throughout all of history, we've never seen anything there. What do random mutations do? They cause disease and syndromes in their species. And many a times, these species that have these random mutations don't even make it out of the womb. My daughter so many things can go wrong when you get pregnant, right? My daughter had a miscarriage. Many of you did. We had a stillborn. Things happen. And it's very complex. But something is wrong. It's not positive. And then as far as the second law of thermodynamics, if you wind up a clock, it'll run down, and it runs down. I had to run errands today, and I had to get gas in my car. Why? It was running out of gas. It doesn't run perpetually. Your bedroom doesn't get cleaner with time through chance or random mutation. And your mom knows this. She's very good at this. It'll only get cleaner if you clean it and put effort and energy and thought into it. Chance random mutation won't make things better. It makes things worse and less organized. Now, if I took a deck of 52 cards or 54 cards with the jokers left in, and I took it here and I shot it over the stage, there is the possibility that it might form an English letter, either capital or small letter, right? There is that chance. But that's a pretty simple thing, right? Because some letters are very simple. It looks like an I. It looks like an S, kind of, or a Z. But it's not enough information to form DNA, which has billions of combinations that unlock the reason you are the way you are, your height, the color of your hair, different things about you. But there's not enough information with these 52 cards. So you know what we're going to do? I'm going to stand on the top of this 35-foot roof, and then I'm going to do it because I need the cards to have more time to make their random decisions in all their wisdom to form letters to create. But we know with that extra time, what are you going to get? More randomness. Oh, but I'm not done. Because now we're going to take a helicopter ride, and we're going to go a few thousand feet up. And we're going to shoot the cards out the window, and man, there's so much more time that those cards, they have the chance to organize. Will they organize? They will become more random. You'll be lucky to find any of them. They're certainly not going to be forming letters. You know, it's interesting because when I was in high school, I was interested in science. And I think at that time the earth was maybe a few billion years old. Universe of, it's just, and I've aged, but now it's like 2.4 trillion or something like that. I don't know. It just, and I don't think I've aged that much. It's just weird, but they're just going higher and higher with the deck of cards, and they're not getting any more organization. But let's just throw more time at it and lie to you, and maybe you'll believe it. There's a reason I think that public schools, because they're full of atheists at the top, not necessarily the teachers, but education's getting worse, and there's a reason for it, because it's way harder to control uneducated people. That's why we as Christians need to really, if your kids are in public school, man, help them be a witness and look at their homework and tell them the Christian view of everything that they do. And if you do it right, they might be better equipped than a homeschool kid, but it's a lot of work, isn't it? Because you got to watch out what they're learning at school. Not only from their teacher, not only from their friends, but from their teachers as well, right? So you got to be careful. But the people that want to control don't want you to be educated and thoughtful. And they certainly don't want you to believe in a God of the universe that you would be accountable to, because they want you to be accountable to them. It's always been this way. So it is interesting that there's no solid evidence, and that is what they believe. Now, there's evidence they make up all the time, and they'll browbeat you for not believing it. But once you really look into it, it's not there. Why? Well, Romans 1:18, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. That suppressing is a willing thing that they do. They make a choice. Because what may be known of God is manifested in them. He planted it in them. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, Romans chapter 12. For God has shown it to them, his creation. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. A man makes love to his wife, and 9 months later, a baby pops out. How did that happen? He had nothing to do other than what God designed him to do, but he did not build that baby. And the mom's amazed at what's happening in her belly. She did not build the baby either. God designed that baby to grow. And this amazing thing happens. And there's love for believer and unbeliever towards those children, and a desire to protect and provide for that child. Where does the love come from if we're just a bunch of rocks that have evolved with life? It just goes on and on. It is so evident that someone, eventually you've got to cry out, there has to be a God. And that's what it's saying here. The care, the beauty, the awesomeness of God. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God. Again, another willful choice. Nor were thankful, another willful choice, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools as far as God goes. And they changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Guys, there's a whole lot of people with PhDs that think that humanity ought to become extinct on earth to protect the earth and nature. They worship nature over man. You can get the government in California to pay for your abortion. But if you touch a condor nest in Morro Bay, on this formation called Morro Bay Rock, you will get several $1,000s worth of a fine if you just touch the nest. But they will pay for your abortion of a human. Romans 1 is true today, guys. They refuse to believe that God created the heavens and the earth. They suppress the truth, and they end up worshiping the creature rather than the creator. And that's rebellious. That's a rebellious heart of man apart from God. Because without God, you have to believe in something else. Why? You're created to believe. You will worship something else. Why? You were created to worship. You will seek to find security in something else. Why? Because you need security to survive and to function. And the world will provide pseudo things to fulfill what God desires to fulfill in you, but they never add up, and at the end of your life, they're empty and they can't do anything. A man named Niall Eldridge wrote this. He says, We paleontologists have said that history of life in the fossil record supports the story of gradual evolution, all the while knowing that it does not. Honest scientists. You know what? It's not science, it's fraud. Science means to know. God is science, or omniscient, means all-knowing. Science means to know, not to hypothesize. And listen, all the evidence out there has to be interpreted. That's where they get it wrong. What about the evidence? No, that isn't the question, guys. It's who's interpreting the evidence and what presuppositions they go into it. I look at the Grand Canyon and I go, oh my gosh, I can see all the layers of how this floated here and dropped here, and this floated here, dropped here, and it was pretty soft. And then what happened? An inland sea raised up, and it shot through there to try to get to the ocean. Then you get the Colorado River, and you get this big old gutted thing that didn't happen over billions and billions of years. It happened pretty quickly, and now it's moving pretty slowly. Evolutionist goes up, oh, the dust blowing across the plains for trillions of years. Where's your presuppositions? But then you get into the actual science and knowing, and the evidence supports a flood. It does not support billions and billions of years of forming that way. Then God said, verse 24, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beasts of the earth, each according to its kind, and it was so. And God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, the cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So on the sixth day, land dwellers. In the book of Revelation, it talks about this man that thinks he's going to be God and be worshipped as God because Satan wants to be worshipped as God, and Satan possesses this man. We know him as the Antichrist. And the number that this man is associated is 666. And it's not because it's Ronald Wilson Reagan, because liberals thought because he was conservative, his first name, middle name, and last name had 6 letters each. He must be the Antichrist. Well, he wasn't. And we get into all these weird theories. When it happens, it'll be, oh yeah, perfect. God, you nailed it. But we don't know how that's going to work out specifically. Procter & Gamble was supposed to be the Antichrist, and all kinds of things over the years, all kinds of theories. But it's associated with the number 6. Why? Because 6 is the number of man. Why? Man was created on the 6th day. Okay? And that's why it is so. He's a man that wants to be worshipped as God. Now, Darwin wrote himself way over 150 years ago, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. 1800s, right? Darwin. 1950s, DNA digital code. Each cell in your body contains your DNA. You guys know that, right? And it has a digital code that writes you. We know about DNA now. We know that it's a digital code, that it's a language. You don't get a language as complex as that can write the color of your eyes, the texture of your hair, the thickness of your nails, the height of your bones, male or female. You don't get that randomly. But he's saying slight. And what happened is most scientists do not believe in slight modifications. They believed in this punctuated equilibrium that happens all of a sudden. And they have to, because they know that slight ones won't work. But you know what colleges are still teaching today? Darwinian evolution. Now, if you get in the higher classes, they might teach something other. But what does science actually point to? The knowledge actually point to? It points to an intelligent design. It points to a designer. Each after its own kind. And again, these variations among different kinds of species are just variations, and they'll never become another kind of species without manipulation, without knowledge, and without effort. Because scientists are doing this, and they're going, look, evolution works. No, you put time and information and effort into it. Oh, so you're just proving that God had to do it. That's all they prove. So in the insect world, they took these animals, these insects that die really quickly. And since they have these very short generations of life, they experimented with 80,000 generations of fruit flies. And during this, they bombarded them with all kinds of radiation, and they ended up with millions of fruit flies. And they created false mutations through their bombarding them by radiation. And they found that in the end, the fruit flies were actually still fruit flies. 80,000 generations. So the conclusion then is obviously that one professor says, the fruit fly has evolved as far as it can go, therefore it will not evolve anymore. And that's what happened. Instead of realizing that God created each after its own kind. And you can apply this across the board, and there are no transitional forms of any creature, plant, animal, or fish. It's not just animals. George Gaylord Simpson said this: the regular absence of transitional forms is not confined to mammals, but it's an almost universal phenomenon and has long been noted by paleontologists. They know this, but they refuse to believe it. What came first again, the chicken or the egg? It's easy. Fully formed chicken able to lay eggs. Because God created it that way. And that's the only way it makes sense. Genesis 1:26, then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion. You know what? I went too long. We're going to save the creation of man for next week. So, because I'm on a roll and it would take all night to get through this section. But anyways, guys, I hope you're encouraged just to know that you know God, and you know that there's a creator God. And that creator God is who you're seeking to worship. And there's a lot of theories on what religion is right. What religion is right? And the fact of the matter is, they're all wrong or one is right because they all have exclusive claims. Now those that say, oh no, they're all on roads to God, but that would mean that one is wrong for sure because Jesus said what? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. That's an exclusive claim. And so, and I've done this to a fair amount, what do you do then? Well, they're either all wrong or one is right. And so you take the evidence of the writings because that's what you have. That's all you have. And you look at the major religions where major amounts of people would believe in these certain religions. And you look at the writings. And you look at the evidence, the historical evidence. You look at the textual evidence. And you look at the generational evidence. You look at all the evidence you possibly can. And I tell you what, guys, none of them hold up except for the Bible. Of any of the major religions that are around today. None of them hold up. And if you doubt me, do a study on it through different people. F.F. Bruce is incredible at this, and he's been dead for a long time. But just the amount of information is incredible. And guys, a lot of people say, well, what about the Middle Eastern religions? Well, they still have to believe in an eternal universe. And the universe is God. That's what they believe. And their goal is to escape pain and just get absorbed into the universal one. And they don't even have a writing. They have billions of different theories on how it works. And you think, oh, karma is such a beautiful thing, you know, what comes around goes around. Really? You want all your thoughts to come back at you? I like the idea of forgiveness and grace way better. And it just goes on and on and on. And you know, karma and dogma, like, so you come back in your next life and you pay the price for your previous life. There's no grace in that. You just get what you deserve. And in many of these cultures, it is the belief within the Hindu and the Buddhist religion that you don't help out people that are suffering because they deserved it. So when the tsunami went across the Indian Ocean and wiped out tens of thousands of people, you know who rushed in to help? Christians. They did not help each other for the most part because it's what you deserve. And many of them were saying, this is the wrath of God. The Muslims are saying, this is just the wrath of God. They deserved it. And that's pretty wild. Our God is a God of love. And he stands up under scrutiny. He's not afraid of your questions. In fact, I always get people to, keep on asking questions. Good question. Why don't you go find out and tell me what you find? Because God, if you're honestly seeking, God is not afraid of your honest questions. A la Thomas, the doubter. Stick your hands in my wounds. I want you to really know. And don't just ask stupid questions to dismiss God. He'll know you're just being cheesy. But if you're asking an honest question, he wants to give you an honest answer. And then it comes to a point where you're just like, okay, God, I'm just tired of answering so many questions. I just got to worship. You come to that point. But some people keep on asking questions, and I tell them, I go, so if you're seeking to know all you can about God, he's infinite. You'll never have enough questions to find out who God is completely. You got to come to a point of believing. And guys, God gave us the evidence, and especially today. We're not back in the monkey Scopes trials in the early 1900s. No, we're way far beyond that, and science is way more developed, and we have no excuse. And so even though this wasn't such a, God is glorious, and know that he is real. And he cares about his creation, and he's creative, and he's loving, and he created you for a specific purpose, for a specific reason. And our goal is to find out what that is. Things go on us we don't know. Man, I'm going through a trial. I don't know why I'm going through this trial. In eternity, I'll know a little bit more, maybe. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, it's not useless. And so I can continue on because I'm tired. But it's not useless. I know that for one thing, because I still know God is good. And man, hats off to atheists that are true atheists. I couldn't live a day without my God. I would freak out. If nothing means anything, why be nice? If nothing means anything, why have any hope whatsoever? And as soon as pain comes, boom, I'm out of here, because why not? Because nothing means anything. And man, that's not where God has left us. And again, he refers to himself so many times to the scriptures as creator for a reason. Because we can trust in someone so much greater than ourselves. And I tell you what, I'm such a knucklehead. I'm so glad I have someone to trust in that's greater than me. Let's go ahead and pray. Dear God, we thank you for your incredible creation. And Lord, let us be in awe and let our faith grow because of it, we would pray. We love you, Lord. And you are good, and you are worthy of worship, God. Encourage us as we leave this place that we are standing on solid ground in you. And that you care about the detail, even as you created the vast expanse. And you are an awesome God. And we love you, Lord. So encourage our hearts, lift up our heads, and give us hope every day in what you say you did for us. And we just trust it fully because it's more true than everything else around us, because it's your eternal truth, it's your eternal plan. And we love you, God. In Jesus' name, amen.